Most highly honorable and exalted Master Chief Petty Officers, most honorable Senior Chief Petty Officers, and honorable Chief Petty Officers, how are you? This is Chief Select Scotto-Lavino, and I'm just putting together a little video. So, started off with finding a retired chief who's been out for over 20 years. The process was a little difficult. However, I used my resources, and I was able to get in contact with a woman named Penny Estrada. We actually put her daughter in the Navy a couple years back when I first reported in June of 2016, and she's become actually a good friend. She works with the Blue Star Moms. The Blue Star Moms are the organization, if you don't know, that deal with parents for kids who are in the military. So she's helped us out at DEP meetings, and she's been fantastic. So I gave her a call because she has a lot of ties to a lot of different people, and it wasn't much time after that I received a phone call from this chief. His name is Jack Delaney. Jack Delaney was actually in the Navy at the age of 17 years old, and he joined as a D seaman, which he didn't think actually existed anymore. He thought they were all hull technicians, funny enough, but he was a D seaman, and later as a first class converted to an HM1 hospital corpsman. He spent time on 5 different ships, the first one being the USS Missouri, which to me was extremely cool. A lot of history behind that ship, BB-63. He did time on the Oriskany, I hope I'm saying that right, and then the USS Lexington, the USS Geiger, and then the USS Barry. While in HMC, though, he was a Fleet Marine Force as well, and did time actually as the advisor to the South Korean Marine Force. He conducted training and worked with them along with the 3rd Marine Battalion, Jack was a very interesting person. It was actually funny when I went to his house. He didn't even want to let me go. I kind of felt bad leaving, but after talking to him for a little bit, I mentioned I had a wife and a daughter, and he's like, you have to come back and, let me introduce me to the little one and the wife. They sound so interesting. So it was pretty cool. He's an older guy. He's retired now for a long time. His wife, unfortunately, passed away quite some time ago. Her name was Marjorie. They actually met in Japan. She was a nurse in the Navy, registered nurse in the Navy. And the funniest part about all that is me being from Long Island, New York. I found out that he actually married his wife, who was a lieutenant commander at the time, lieutenant, up for lieutenant commander at the time at St. Albans Hospital, Naval Hospital on Long Island, New York. I grew up actually 10 minutes from where that hospital would still be today if it were still around. So that was just really funny that the person I ended up meeting lived 10 minutes from where I grew up. So I thought that was extremely interesting. Jack himself, Chief Delaney, he was actually a high school dropout, but back then, in recruiting duty, we need a high school diploma or GED. Not back then. He was a high school dropout and joined at the age of 17. He said you were actually allowed to ship to boot camp at the age of 17. So it was extremely interesting. Married for over 60 years, actually, and the coolest part, backtracking a little bit, was he was actually married by a Navy captain at St. Albans Hospital. So his whole life was Navy, and it was really cool. Getting to meet him was one of the most interesting things. He's got a daughter and a son. The daughter actually lives in Connecticut, so she's still on the East Coast. And the son he doesn't necessarily talk to all that much. However, he's still around every once in a while. His son is actually a retired deputy sheriff in California. So I went to his house and we sat down, had a cup of coffee, had a really good conversation. It was just really cool to hear about how he led back in the day. Now, things were a little different. Things weren't exactly as PC as they seem to be nowadays. He told me a funny story about a 3rd-class corpsman who was reporting to the hospital, and they had a quarterdeck just like most Navy buildings and ships do. So the story was that the sailor came up, and his mom had just dropped him off because he was on leave. He just came back and was reporting back to his barracks, and Chief happened to be standing watch on the quarterdeck. And this kid walked in, and he looked like he was walking with something sitting in his pants on the back end. And he told the sailor to turn around. It turns out the sailor was actually walking in with the buttons on the back and the drawstring in the front. So he let it rip into this kid and made him actually change on the spot. So as we can see, if that were to happen today, that might not go as well as it probably did back then. His leadership style was second to none. He was the kind of chief that really took his time with sailors. When he was a damage controlman as a young sailor, he seemed like he was always in a leadership position. He took charge. Didn't matter what his rank was. People knew to follow him. And then later on it paid off because he ended up making chief, and that's where he belonged. He belonged in the chief's mess. And we know this. He still takes part today in the honor flight of Northern Nevada, which is anytime there's people, sailors, or any branch of service coming home, they'll gather up at the airport. I've actually seen it before, which is pretty cool. And they welcome them home. They get them what they need. They get them to where they got to get them, and it's really cool. I really enjoyed every single bit of that conversation, and I will be there once the season's done, said and done. I will definitely be going back over there, and I'm going to try to get him up to Reno to meet all the guys in the office. So moving on to the next part of the video, we're going to go over the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, the first six. So to begin, the first Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy was Master Chief Delbert Black. He was named actually he wasn't even MCPON at the time. He was named the first senior enlisted advisor in the Navy in January 1967. And it wasn't too much longer after that where they changed the name to Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy because they wanted to get a little more uniform between the branches, like for the Marine Corps, it was Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps and et cetera for the Air Force and Army. One of the cool things that I noticed about him was that he was actually the person to initiate the Command Master Chief program. If you want to talk about leadership, that's exactly how it's done in Sailorization as well. Putting together a program like that, now you're taking a Master Chief and localizing leadership, and you're localizing any little bit of what a junior sailor needs, from E1 all the way to E whatever. Now we know that even the little sailor has a voice, and that's that Command Master Chief that can be that voice to get it to the captain and get it to the admiral, get it to whatever level, the commodore, it doesn't matter. So that leadership and Sailorization, now we can take those sailors who, maybe didn't have so much of a voice before, and now they can be heard because there is a Command Master Chief local. So I found it very interesting learning about Delbert Black, married to Ima Black, and it was a good little piece right there. The second MCPON was actually Master Chief John Whittet. He took over as the second MCPON in April of 1971. A couple of interesting things is he took office when women were first stationed on ships, so he had a piece of that. So that was really cool. That's innovation right there. That's changing the game. We now know that since females are allowed on ships, Master Chief Whittet had a big part in that. He was actually also part of the first. He was part of the reason why we do urinalysis and on ships, and then he was also, and very importantly, he started the Chief Selection Board. So, before they were named chiefs, where now it's more of a selection board and being chosen as a chief. On a leadership standpoint for Master Chief, allowing women to be stationed on ships says a lot about his character, and that's a big thing right there. I'm sure he faced a ton of adversity when saying that women could be stationed on ships. Maybe they didn't have the berthings at the time, the facilities, whatever it was. And I know he faced adversity when it came, but he overcame it. And that's how he became Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, by looking adversity in the face and saying this is the right thing to do and getting it done. The third Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy was Master Chief Robert Walker. He took the reins as MCPON in September 1975. I found it very interesting for him because he was actually born and raised in Baldwin, New York, which again, just like Chief Delaney, was just about 10, maybe 15 minutes from where I grew up. Something interesting about Master Chief, he was actually the one who started the Senior Enlisted Academy, which every MCPON after him actually attended and graduated from. It wasn't necessarily that it was a requirement at the time. However, that program was so successful that it bred MCPONs, so it was pretty amazing. He also, he took, for his version of Sailorization, he started the ESWAS program. So now you didn't just have subject matter experts in one field. He made sure that sailors had the opportunity to be recognized for their extra time putting in and learning everything about the ship. So if, God forbid, anything ever happened on a ship and a certain department was wiped out, now these ESWAS warriors can go ahead and take care of business. Having sailors learn the basics creates better and more diverse sailors. So to me, that was one of the biggest things he did. He looked at subs at the time, and the subs had their dolphins. And they're like, why aren't we doing this on ships? So what did he do? He worked with staff and created the program. The fourth MCPON was Master Chief Thomas Crow. So Master Chief Thomas Crow took over in September 1979, and he was it was kind of cool in that he was the Master Chief that was the program coordinator envisioning the phase 2 of Equal Opportunity program. Equal Opportunity, I don't care where you're stationed. It is one of the biggest programs. It's extremely important. We have to make sure we're such a strong nation because of our diversity. We're a strong Navy because of our diversity. If it wasn't for equal opportunity, that could slip. So Master Chief Crow took the time to take the equal opportunity program to the next level. Caring about sailors and embracing this diversity was a big reason why he ended up becoming a MCPON. And he actually ended his tour as the MCPON, but he stayed heavily involved in the Navy as a retiree. He was actually a part of the Navy League, and which to me was kind of a big deal because the Navy League down here in Reno, or actually Carson City, recognizes sailors. Just recently, MM2 Gabris was recognized as Sailor of the Quarter. So they do a whole thing. They do a dinner, raffle. It's just a good night. And they award her with Sailor of the Quarter. So seeing that he was a part of that was kind of a big deal to me. The Carson Navy League recognizes people all the time, and if it wasn't for people like Master Chief Crow, that program probably wouldn't even exist. Moving on to the fifth Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, we have Master Chief Billy Sanders. So the fifth MCPON, the funny part is he became MCPON, but he didn't even start his career in the Navy. He was actually in the Air Force for his first 3 years in, and he joined the Navy later on as an aviation electrician. He was in the running for the fourth MCPON, actually, but Master Chief Crow was chosen before him. But that just goes to show you that he was ready for the position, and next time up, when it came time for selection for MCPON, he took the cake. He made a big statement when it came to grooming standards. So back then, men were allowed to have beards in the Navy, and he was the person to go ahead and take them away. I know a lot of people nowadays with the female regulations, 163.18, they're changing the female standards, and now a lot of guys are complaining that they want beards back. Well, it was Master Chief Billy Sanders that took away the beards in the first place. So if they want that, maybe they need to speak up to the MCPON and get it back. So I don't know. It's very interesting that he disseminates all his information to sailors also that they needed to be physically fit. So there was really no physical standards. Sure, they had to run, push-ups, sit-ups, they did their PT, but he held them to a higher standard in that he actually created the physical fitness requirements. So that was pretty interesting, and that goes ahead, and that's accountability right there. Accountability is a big part of being a chief, being part of being a sailor in the Navy, and he held every sailor to that standard. Lastly, for this video, the sixth Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy was Master Chief William Plackett. He was selected as the MCPON in October 1985, which is actually just a couple months after, 1 month, after I was born, September 1985. He was actually named the First Force Master Chief of the Atlantic Fleet Training Command. So he already had he had very important positions moving forward. And, there were many people nowadays that were the first to do something. There are not many people nowadays who could say they were the first to do something. So that's pretty cool that he was one of the first Force Master Chiefs of that command. Before his Master Chief tour, he was actually the CMC for Commander Training Command. So as you can see, Atlantic Fleet Training Command, Commander Training Command, he is all about sailorization. We have to train sailors. If you don't train sailors, they're not going to, you got to fight the ship. And without trained sailors, we're not going to have that. So Master Chief obviously had a big say in anything related to training, which is a big deal with leadership and a huge deal with sailorization. It's also pretty interesting to me that someone so involved in training would be an instructor for the Command Master Chief program. So he actually was an instructor for the Command Master Chief program, and he himself also was a high school dropout. So for someone who didn't take the time to get that much training, he obviously went ahead and said, you know what, maybe I got to learn from my mistakes, and sailors can learn from my mistakes. So he took training to a higher level, knowing that what he did in the past maybe wasn't the best decision. So he moved forward and communicated that message to sailors to help them become better sailors. I've thoroughly enjoyed making this video. It was fantastic to meet Jack Delaney. It's extremely important to understand this, have the sense of heritage and understand our Master Chief Petty Officers of the Navy. I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to you being able to see it and talking over it later. And thank you very much.